Thank you so much for joining us for our first episode of Biblio Files, where we will choose a new book topic each week. We each have about a minute and a half to tell you about the book that we chose related to the topic. I'm Lucy, and I'm here with Christopher and Amanda, and today's topic is a book that you love that nobody else has heard of. So, Christopher, would you like to tell us what you picked today?
Sure. This is a really fun question. There are so many books, and there are some that people have never heard of, but I chose this book by, it's by Kate Summerscale. Sorry, forgot her name. I think this was her first book, called Queen of Whale Key, and I had to learn how to pronounce that word. It's not K.
Right.
This is a fascinating biography about a woman who really purposefully wanted to lead her life in a very mannish way, dressing as a man. She was a famous speedboat driver, and she had her own chauffeur business in London. And interestingly, she bought an island to live, and she had a mannequin that became her bosom colleague, called Lord Todd Wadley, and she made up all kinds of stories about this mannequin. He had his own checkbook and his own Bible, and he became almost a surrogate for her as she aged. She started to become less wild, and he became more and more wild. So it's just a fascinating book. It's one of those biographies that touches on so many wild escapades and so many interesting, famous people throughout. I really enjoyed this, and I was lucky to see this same author has a new book out that the library has, and I don't remember that book, but I think that's a true life murder mystery. So I loved it.
Wow, that's great. I have never heard of that, so I'm excited to have a new read.
Great. Amanda?
Yes, so I had a hard time with this question, and the book I chose I love, and whenever I mention it to somebody, they haven't heard of it, but it is known out in the world. It's a book from Iceland. It's called Jar City, and it's written by Arnaldur Indriðason. Apologies for mispronunciation. It's part of a series, and this was the first one in the series. It was translated and came out in the US around 2005, but it's a typical detective mystery. If you're into Nordic crime or Scandinavian mysteries, this is for you. I love the detective. It's the Detective Erlander series, and Jar City starts with a murder. There's backstory on the detective, and there's a murder, and there's a few other storylines that are told separately, and they sort of all converge, and there's an ending. It's book one in the series. There's many books in this series, but the first three I highly recommend: Jar City, Silence of the Grave, and Voices. I loved Voices, but definitely start with Jar City, and I would read the first three, especially if you're looking for a new mystery or if you are looking to explore some of the Scandinavian fiction. Highly recommend.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. What do you got, Lucy?
Okay. So my pick is by an author that you might know. Her name's Tove, I think, Jansson. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but she writes the Moomin, like these kids comics. She's known for this. She's Scandinavian. She's from Finland, but she wrote about 10 novels for adults, and this one is called The Summer Book. It was written in 1972, and it is one of those books that's kind of about nothing but about everything at the same time. It's about a little girl who's 6 years old, Sophia, and her grandmother, and then her father's sort of off. He doesn't really feature in it, and they're on an island for the summer, and it's just really about the relationship between this very old woman and this very young child, and each chapter sort of starts with them in conflict, but they resolve their conflict in the most interesting of ways, and they're like best friends basically, and it all kind of circles around this central event, which is Sophia's on this island because her mother has died. So it sounds like that would be sad, but it's also really funny at times, and it's this amazing story of someone trying to grow up and someone wrestling with aging. And then each chapter could sort of be its own little short story about something that they do on the island or someone they run into. And it has this very serene, distilled feeling to it. It's like she's captured the feeling of summer, kind of that heavy heat, but also that quiet and that. So I don't know. It's one of those books that I read and I just was like, it just spoke to me. But I have not run into many people who have heard of it or even know that this woman wrote fiction at all. So that's the summer book.
I haven't heard of that one either.
Yeah.
So what do we have coming up next week?
Next week is The Prettiest Book on Your Bookshelf.
And so we welcome AADL patron comments. You're welcome to tell us how you would answer this week's Biblio File question. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.